and welcome to Boardroom Confidential, a podcast from the Australian Institute of Company Directors. I'm Bennett Mason, and thanks very much for joining us. In each episode, we talk with some of Australia's top directors, leaders, and experts about many of the key issues that boards are grappling with today. This time, our guest is Mathew Graham, the Chief Security Officer for identity platform Okta in the Asia-Pacific region. We spoke with Mathew last year about all things cybersecurity, but technology moves so quickly now, we thought it was important to check in with him again. Mathew, thanks so much for joining us again on Boardroom Confidential.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
So, I mentioned a moment ago that technology is moving very, very, very quickly now. We're all aware of that. But those advancements in tech are, of course, tied in with the rise of artificial intelligence. So, what is the increasingly widespread adoption of AI meant for cybersecurity? And in particular, what does that mean for boards?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're absolutely right, because so much has changed. I mean, even the 6 months since we last spoke, right? The AI landscape is changing. New models are coming out all the time. We've got agentic AI being the biggest thing now that people are talking about. So what it really has meant then, I mean, if you're considering the boards and you're considering the director, it's moving, security up from that protective type of action more into that sort of governance space and that governing action. And what are they doing around, because it's no longer is about protecting systems and data. It's about, what can happen within an organization, what's happening autonomously, what are your non-human identities doing, what are those agents doing, and how's that controlled? So I think boards are no longer, overseeing just access. It's more about behavior as well. You've got AI that's introducing autonomous actors that are operating, and it's really changing what accountability looks like. So traditionally, security focused on protecting that access into the environment, into the organization. But in an AI world, it's all about governing behavior. And what does that look like? So from what we're seeing, and we did a survey from the Businesses at Work 2026 report, only 10% of organizations today feel equipped to manage this autonomous action, these AI agents and non-human identities. So really, it's AI is shifting security more from access into action. What are they actually doing?
Why do you think that 10% number is so low? What's the problem?
I think it's because, I mean, you mentioned right at the start, right? Things are changing so quickly. Now, when things are changing as rapidly as what they are, a lot of people have a tendency to sort of let the dust settle and see what happens and see what sort of comes of all of this and then take some actions. But the sizes that I'm talking to, for them, it's more about acting now. And I think that's the right thing to be doing as well, is to be acting now, is to be putting this governance in place, putting these policies in place, and having processes for their organizations to be able to use AI agents, to be able to use these non-human identities, because that's what boards are after. That's what shareholders are after as well.
Let's keep talking a little bit about that. We're seeing businesses and organizations across the economy now really embedding AI in their operations. But can you talk a bit more about how the workforce is changing more and more and more as we see companies introduce AI agents and, as you said, non-human identities?
Yeah, I mean, the workforce traditionally, you think of a workforce, you think of an organizational chart, and you think of people. And that's what's really changing now, is that there's AI agents that are operating within organizations. They're accessing systems, they're accessing personal information about individuals, and then it's also making decisions and executing tasks on that basis. So these aren't a passive tool, right? Like, it's not something that somebody is operating or something that somebody's checking in on. These are things that are actively doing things in the business processes. So at scale, that's where it becomes significant, right? So it's, and again, going back to that report that we did, the number of non-human identities can outnumber humans by 45 to 1, we found. So it's quite big. So it's many organizations aren't just managing humans anymore. Like, they're managing a growing population of autonomous identities that are that are out there doing the work that people were doing. And I think what makes this different is that you know what people are up to, and you know what they're doing, and you know the team that they're in. When you get autonomous agents that are doing work, they're moving across systems, they're moving across workflows, they're looking at huge data sets across all your different systems. So it's a really different way of operating, a really different way of working, which has a really different security model that boards need to be aware of. The workforce now has identities that act autonomously. It's not just people that are just logging in.
There's obviously plenty of advantages that come with having these non-human
Of course,
workers in your
Yeah.
organization, but there is a downside too. I don't want to be overly gloomy, but what are some of those significant risks for boards and for organizations when AI systems are acting autonomously within the business?
Yeah, I mean, the risks that you see from AI agents, I mean, the productivity gains are immense. So there are so many benefits, and in my view, the benefits outweigh the risk. But there are risks and the things that you do have to do properly to be managing non-human identities, which is not different to any other time there has been a shift in the way that we do things in technology. So when there was a uplift into the cloud, you had to have a different way of operating, and you had different employees and different processes, different policies. All of those sort of things have changed. So that's no different today. But what AI introduces is the speed that an agent can operate at, the scale. You can build, almost infinite AI agents, as much as your budget allows, essentially, and then the autonomy of those agents as well. So the governance answer there, or the governance question probably more so, is how are we handling agents? Who's responsible for them? Who's responsible for that particular agent? Because a misconfiguration in identity, which is not dissimilar to a misconfiguration of a human identity, so human or non-human, that would have once had a contained impact because they're operating autonomously, can have a much broader impact, but also in seconds or milliseconds. Like, it just happens so quickly. So it's not about really preventing unintended access. It's about containing the downstream impact of what that access can do.
So what's the worst case scenario if AI identities or non-human workers aren't properly governed or secured?
I mean, the biggest impact is probably just the broad scale of information it can access at speed. So I wouldn't be saying that it's malicious. It's going to be a misconfigured AI agent, something that has overly broad access. It could unintentionally expose some sensitive data, accessing the wrong system, but it could also then be triggering actions that are cascading across different workflows. So because it's these systems are operating continuously, right? So it's not like they're working for a couple of hours, going out to lunch, working for a couple of hours, and they go home. They're operating 24/7. So it's not the initial mistake that matters. It's also the speed of detection of the mistake and the spread. It's really not about what goes wrong. It's how quickly that escalates.
Let's talk about what boards can do and how they might be able to prevent those worst case scenarios. What do you think should be included in a AI governance framework from a security and identity perspective?
It really comes down to three things when you're thinking of a governance framework. It's where are my agents in the environment? What can those agents do? And then what can they access as well? And if they can't answer those and that should form the basis of the framework to get those questions answered. And I think if they can't answer those questions, the framework's probably not effective. So the framework needs to be able to include elements which can answer those questions. So, for us at Okta, we use those three really as a simple way to bring structure. It sounds like it's a really complicated problem, but it's simple if you break it down in that way.
You're a CISO. If you were presenting to a board, what are the major questions that you would want directors, you'd want boards to be asking you about whether these AI systems are being deployed securely?
I mean, it goes back to those three. Ultimately, where are we using AI across our organization? Who's accountable, or do we know who's accountable for each of these agents? And that's an interesting point because when chatting with CISOs, a lot of people are telling me that they don't actually know within in their own environments, their own organizations, what different agents there are and what agents are doing. You get business owners that are implementing agents and agentic behaviors, but they don't actually know where or what exactly is happening. So that needs to be all shored up with governance. That they need to figure out what access do these AI agents have. Boards need to be knowing, not too dissimilar to cybersecurity since the start. Can we monitor it? Can we intervene with any sort of issues? Can we intervene quickly if something happens that's not expected? So I think if a CISO is going to a board and they're presenting on their state of play when it comes to cybersecurity and they can't answer those questions, that's going to be showing a governance gap. If they can't see what's happening, it's and again, since the start of cybersecurity, if you can't see it, you can't control it.
There's a tricky balancing act here for boards and for executives. We want to have strong governance in place. We want to have robust safeguards and frameworks and protocols. But at the same time, you don't want to be a handbrake on innovation, growth, progress. So how do you balance that innovation with control without slowing the organization down?
I mean, the days of no of cybersecurity organizations is behind us, and it's been behind us for quite some time. CISOs and cybersecurity practitioners shouldn't be saying no. They should be giving control. They should be giving the governance, which allows the business to move fast. So by having that clear governance around the use of AI agents, you're an enabler, because you can say this is what you can do. These are the guardrails that we have in place, and it gives the business owners the confidence that they need to be able to implement AI agents in a secure way. So strong frameworks, and when I say strong, I don't mean strong as in restrictive, just a strong control framework that is prescriptive and says what you can do. It removes that trade-off where it's not a slowing factor. It is saying that this is what you can do and these are the good ways that you can do it. When it is in place, what I see is that they can move fast because they know their risks are contained. You don't get a business owner that's erring on the side of caution and not doing things. They're acting because they know what they can do. And I think the goal really should be that you set guardrails within your AI policies that allow experimentation at scale, because things are changing so fast. Like you said at the start, things are just changing so quickly, and things have changed in the last 6 months since we spoke. So you really want to allow that experimentation.
I want to shift a little bit and talk about supply chains. Most organizations, most businesses won't have the resources to build their own AI systems. They're not building their own non-human workers. They're reliant on suppliers, they're reliant on third parties. So all these organizations across the economy are now embedding a range of third-party tools into their workflows. What sort of risks does that create?
You look at the size of compute and the size of resources that AI needs to run. You look at the things that OpenAI, Anthropic, Google are having to set up and operate to be running these systems. So obviously you have to be using a third-party AI service, and often it's an AI service that uses those models as well. So there is that indirect access risk. Whereas if you've got employees connecting external tooling to internal systems, and they don't get that full visibility of what's happening, then you get a bit of you get a layer of exposure beyond your traditional IT security boundary. Again, not dissimilar to what we've been talking about for a long time in cybersecurity. It is an issue around suppliers and an issue around third-party, fourth-party risk. And you just really, what you want to make sure is that you don't have that blind spot. So it's not, the challenge isn't what your systems are doing, it's what they're doing with your data. So your data and your systems are exposed beyond their environment. So you've got to manage that, and you have to manage that risk, and you have to, whether that's through governance, it's looking at controls. What are your third-party organizations and your suppliers? What are they doing to handle your data?
You talked about how boards need to manage data. How should boards do that practically? What steps do they need to take to ensure that data exposure is, I guess, limited as much as possible when employees are using these external AI platforms?
Yeah, and I remember we spoke about this 6 months ago. It was around data and boards having more knowledge around what's happening with cybersecurity. It's there's been
Is it just ask more questions?
data being shared. Where's it going? Who or what can access it? And when we say the what, is it the non-human identity? What can actually access it? What third-party organizations, fourth-party organizations can access it? You want to shift that conversation really from restriction into governance and permission, just so we can enable Aussie companies to grow.
There have been these great changes, these transformations. But at the same time, some things have stayed the same. So, to what extent is AI security still really a people issue rather than a technology problem?
Yeah, I mean, people and culture is still the entry point for so many risks. So, particularly in how people are adopting AI tooling, how they're configuring, how they're trusting AI systems. Ultimately, the AI services that we use are set and ran by humans. So, but on a bigger scale. So AI is amplifying these human decisions at so much quicker scale and so much of a quicker pace than ever before. But it still comes down to having a good culture in place, being permissive about using these services, but in a smart way. And if you're restrictive, too much the feedback I get and the things that I see is that people will just go behind your back and use AI services anyway. So it's really important that you're permissive, but you have the guardrails in place that make sense for your organization.
Culture is really tricky. It can be difficult to measure. It's something that a lot of organizations struggle with. So, how do you build that culture where employees are encouraged to adopt AI, they are encouraged to innovate, but at the same time, they understand the risks?
Yeah.
What's your advice there?
I mean, that comes down to awareness, understanding, having people play with it as well, but in a controlled sort of manner. You'd be educating your employees, and it's something that we do here around education around the use of AI systems. It is, what can the AI access? Just so you're conscious of that. How does the AI behave? You want to be articulating to them, where are those risks? So you need people to really be understanding what is the impact of using AI. Because once they understand that, and once they truly understand it, it'll help them make better decisions. As opposed to, again, if you're head in the sand, you're not doing anything, you're not showing anything, you're not talking about it, and you're not building this culture up around using AI, people will just start to use it anyway, or either in an incorrect way or a way that's a risk for the organization.
Let's talk a bit about the technology itself. Can you talk about how organizations are using AI to make themselves more cyber safe? And then I guess the other side of that is, how are nefarious actors using AI in their cyber attacks?
Yeah, so the way that organizations using AI to be as a defensive sort of tool is because of the broad scale of what AI can do, and that horizontal scale, which can just be almost infinite, that you can have it look over reams and reams of logs from all sorts of different systems, from a technology standpoint, that it can see things that a human operator can't see. Or if you've been making rules, and there's been machine learning now for decades that have been looking at these sort of logs, you just don't get that sort of scale that you do get with generative AI, and generative AI being able to look at these sort of logs. So that's just one example that people are using it. It's also being used, I see, quite well as an educational tool that's more customized for individuals. So going back to the culture thing, right, is that you'll see tooling now that is using AI and generative AI almost like a chatbot to deliver targeted training for that individual and for their role. So it's so much more immersive, it's more engaging, and people love it. So that's a really good way to build up that culture and get that information. The way that nefarious actors are using it is the same, but the opposite, right? You've got that scale that they can be doing. They can be looking at so many different systems. They can be trawling over LinkedIn to find who are the right people to target and sending really customized phishing emails to those individuals. We're still seeing that as one of the biggest attack vectors is traditional phishing. You're getting voice calls now. You're getting really earnest sounding calls, and this is applying even in the non-work space as well. People getting calls pretending to be their children, saying that we've got this problem. That's how AI is now being used, because that's all can be done in real time. and can use information that's available on the internet to draw in that and make it a more compelling attack.
We've talked a lot about what boards should do, what directors should do to create that oversight. But also directors themselves and boards themselves are using AI, either as individual directors or as the boardroom collectively. What what steps should directors and boards take to ensure that they themselves are staying safe in the way that they're using AI tools?
Um, I think they should be focusing, like if the way for them to be staying safe. And I mean, if they're setting guidance for an organization, you'd really want them to be looking at some frameworks, thinking like an Essential 8 that the ACSC's put out. And that's a really good starting point, and it's a good foundation, but it doesn't really fully address because it wasn't designed for that. So you'd be wanting to look at governance frameworks if you're looking at it for an organization. For them themselves and their own usage, and if it's a personal case, it is controlling what sort of information you're putting into AI services. So on a personal level and with their personal accounts, that information can be used for training future models. So if we're using it from a chatbot perspective. So just being conscious of that information that is getting put into AI services, understanding those terms and conditions and how that data will be used as well. But again, it comes back to three really key and important things: that if it can act, if it's it's got to be visible, it's got to be controlled, it's got to be governed. It's just like with humans. If you're going back to the organization, you're using AI, you got to be just looking at those three things, and it's the starting point for really managing. It's how you're managing your humans as well, and the humans and non-humans. If you're doing with agents in the organization, it's no different, and it hasn't been any different.
We do a survey twice a year of directors called the Director Sentiment Index. And one of the questions we always have is, what keeps you up at night? So, as a CISO, Matthew, as AI becomes more autonomous, what keeps you up at night from a security perspective?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that I just mentioned. Then it's that visibility. You lose visibility. You get AI agents that grow and grow and grow, and you get it's you use any tool for the first time and it looks great and you think, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to scale this. I'm going to build this bigger and bigger and bigger. The fastest growing identity type is AI agents. But conversely, on the flip side, they're the least governed because they're not people. So it's this growth of AI agents. It's without any sort of visibility that's happening in an organization, this unfettered access that they can get. That's at risk, and that's the biggest risk that I see.
Directors, part of the role is not just looking at the opportunities and the challenges of today. They need to be looking into the future, the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So, what are some of the big changes that you see coming down the road that directors should be thinking about now? What developments in AI, cybersecurity, identity are going to be front of mind in the decade to come?
We're going to see a catch up in governance from a government perspective soon. So that's something which I think is on the horizon over the next year or two, is that you'll see more guidance coming from government, and not just in Australia, but for, this is important for organizations operating across Asia-Pacific and the rest of the world. The feedback that I hear is that in Singapore, they're very advanced when it comes to setting policy and government setting policy and governance around the use of AI services. In Europe, they're very far advanced as well. Australia is going to catch up, and we're going to have AI policies coming from government very soon around, and there are discussion papers out today around what we should be doing and what organizations should be doing. There's APRA guidance that's just been released around it that should be, what should we be doing? You're going to see more and more of that. So it's certainly on the horizon. In terms of the growth of models and the prediction, things are just changing so quickly that it's just going to get more and more capable over time, and at a rate that we haven't seen the plateau yet, and we haven't seen the top of what that capability will be. You'll see it in technology media all the time that a new model is released and it's this 20% improvement, and you get that 20% improvement next time, and then 20% improvement. You get that compounding 20% each time, multiple times a year. It's easy to see in 2 years' time the capability uplift that'll happen from AI models.
Are there any of these uplifts that really excite you or that really concern you?
It is exciting. I think it is an exciting time. I think it's an exciting time to be able to enable human creativity and to enable AI services to be doing the business processes that help an organization grow without being stuck in doing these business processes manually by humans. That's what I find exciting. And then your brain power and your thought and your critical thinking can be used into how do we do things better? How do we do things better at an organization? How do we grow this organization more without having to look at the mundane? So that's what I think is really exciting. The fear comes from those things I've spoken about, right? That lack of visibility, those AI agents that are acting autonomously. We've seen releases like software like called OpenClaw, right, which can act completely autonomously by looking at your inbox and looking at your computer and looking at all these different things and just doing things on your behalf entirely. But then there's also problems associated with that as well. So it's all very exciting. Governance needs to catch up.
So what sort of capabilities do you think boards will need going into the future? What sort of skills? And then what about the workforce more broadly? What sort of skills or capabilities will they need?
More now than ever, it's important to keep up to date and to keep current, which has always been the case in cybersecurity, always been the case in technology. It is just so important now that you are up to date with what's happening out there. What can the latest models do? And even if it is at that broad knowledge level, staying curious, staying interested, seeing what they can do and seeing what the major AI organizations out there are releasing in terms of their capability. But the thing I always encourage people to do, even at the most basic level, is just to play with it, see what its capabilities are, allow you to expand your thinking and think, geez, this would actually be quite good to use in X, Y, or Z. And it can also help you with your governance queries. You could be asking it, saying, hey, we're looking at doing this sort of solution. What should we do to get the governance around that? So that's what I'd be encouraging anybody to do, is just to be looking at it and using it. And I think that's what the most important thing is that you can do.
So play around with the technology, play around with the models, but do so safely.
That's right. Yeah. Don't introduce them into your organization without that governance in place.
We're nearly out of time, Mathew, but if a board could take one immediate action to better secure both human and non-human workers, what would it be?
I mean, from my standpoint, and I am at an identity provider, but I will also be saying at a very non-biased is to focus on identity, is to focus on what these agents are. Look at things like the Essential 8. You need to extend your thinking into identities that are there acting autonomously, that are working today in the environment, working today in the organization. You've got to get that visibility in control. You've got to get the control sorted out. What can they do? You've got to get that governance in place. And I really do think that's the starting point. We have a AI readiness tool. So it's called the Okta AI readiness tool. And that'll give a score on basically how secure your AI agents are today. So it's something that people can just Google. They can just search for the Okta AI readiness tool. It's basically a series of questions. And it talks about like which is really good, I think, for a board member or for a director to be going through based on their own personal knowledge. What do I know about our environment, our organization? That'll show exactly where there could be a trust issue or where the risk is, and then also what to do to fix it.
Can you give us just quickly a few of those AI readiness questions?
I mean, it comes down to what are those AI agents doing today? Like, do you actually know what those agents are doing today? It's around that knowledge of that visibility, those three things: visibility, control, governance. The questions are all centered around that.
Mathew, I think we'll wrap things there, but thanks for joining us again on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.